everyone. Apparently Glenn Greenwald has posted a 15-minute manifesto about me to the internet, so I thought we could watch it together. Let's check it out. So first of all, he tweets, "The titan of American journalism, Taylor Lorenz, just issued her State of the Media address, mourning the mass layoffs sweeping her industry. It's worth hearing." Thanks for saying it's worth hearing, Glenn. "Nothing could more clearly expose the pathologies within US media that have led to their well-deserved collapse." Okay, well, let's see what this man has to say.
One of the people who has decided that she is a success story, who regards herself as one of the giants of American journalism.
Okay, definitely don't regard myself as a giant of American journalism.
Is Taylor Lorenz, who used to work at the New York Times, caused one drama after the next.
Caused one drama after the next. If by that you mean broke page one stories.
Then made her way to the Washington Post. She basically, as we're gonna show you, started her career by hanging outside of houses that are filled with 16 and 17 and 18-year-old TikTok influencers.
Okay, what?
Where she would try and induce them to speak to her and give her secrets.
What? First of all, I started my career in 2009 as a blogger and internet personality. Last I checked, TikTok was not around then. I don't know what he's talking about. I also have never hung out outside TikTok houses.
She would go and get 17-year-olds canceled. And so she built a TikTok platform just by using the names over and over of 17-year-old boys who were extremely popular among adolescent girls, even though she was 40.
40? What? First of all, they're obsessed with making me older than I am. It's so weird. It's so deeply weird because it's like people I went to high school with and elementary school with, like, are on the internet and have said like many times, like, we went to high school with Taylor, we went to middle school with Taylor. I'm obviously a millennial. My work history like very publicly begins in 2009. Everyone knows when I graduated college. So it's like, if I'm 40, like where's this like missing decade in my life? Anyway. Also, what 17-year-olds am I getting canceled? I don't know what you're talking about. I actually have my TikTok following from Musical.ly. I was amused the 2016 election, but that's a story for another day. I used to do social media on Musical.ly, and my name was Mark Zuckerberg, by the way, on Musical.ly.
When doing it, and somehow this convinced her that she's some kind of like giant of American journalism who now is in a position to issue state of the media addresses.
Okay, the only person issuing a State of the Media address here seems to be Glenn.
Similar to the way the president issues a State of the Union address. And so she went to TikTok to talk about the reason why her entire generation basically has proven to be complete failures.
Wait, my entire generation. What generation am I in, Glenn? What generation am I in? Am I in your generation? I'm pretty sure you're in like your 50s or something. So am I in my 40s and I'm in your generation, or am I actually a millennial? Make it make sense.
And I think it's really worth listening to what she has to say. Obviously not because there's any wisdom in it, but because it illustrates the pathologies and sicknesses that have caused the collapse of that part of the media and the unbelievable inability to accept responsibility. Even though she purports to say some of this is our fault, you'll see in the way in which she says it, it's really just the pretense of accepting responsibility, but not actually any attempt to grapple with the true pathologies of media.
The entire journalism industry is basically in a free fall. Today, the Los Angeles Times laid off 115 employees. They wiped out their entire DC bureau in an election year. They laid off pretty much all of their sports teams. They killed their entire tech and business section. They laid off breaking news writers, social media editors. The list goes on. But what's really dark is this is just the latest in months and months and months of layoffs in the media industry. In fact, tens of thousands of journalists have been laid off in the past year. Major media companies like BuzzFeed News have completely shuttered their news operations. Time magazine also just laid off a ton of people, and Sports Illustrated basically shut down last week. Pretty much the entire digital media ecosystem that myself and a lot of other millennial journalists came up in has been completely hollowed out. And it's not just digital media.
I gotta just let her repeat that sentence because I love it so much. It's like kind of sweet dessert just entering my body and animating every one of my cells.
Dude, what?
Listen to this sentence.
entire digital media ecosystem that myself and a lot of other millennial journalists came up in has been completely hollowed out. And it's not
The area of media that myself and a lot of my fellow digital millennial journalists has come up in have been completely hollowed out. That is exactly what has happened.
just digital media sites. Local news has been obliterated. The newspaper industry is cratering. Radio is essentially dead aside from NPR, which has been gutted. Meanwhile, hundreds of workers at Condé Nast, the parent company of pretty much every major magazine from GQ to Vogue to The New Yorker to Vanity Fair, are on strike because they're also facing impending layoffs. Even mainstream national media outlets owned by billionaires like The Washington Post, where I work, and The Atlantic, where I used to work, have done layoffs.
Okay, so we're just watching my TikTok video again at this point. It's crazy, by the way, like how much content these right-wingers have generated off my single TikTok video. Just have to say that.
If you're a young journalist today, there's almost no on-ramp to traditional journalism. Even if you do get a job, journalists' salaries have been stagnant and even declined. And by the way, we don't make that much to begin with. I don't think people understand how bad the world would be without journalists.
Oh, people understand that the world would be bad without journalists. In fact, that's exactly the problem we have, is that none of these people are actually journalists. They do not perform the journalistic function. The journalistic function, and if you go and look at what people for hundreds of years have been describing as the core purpose of the press, the reason there's a freedom of the press guaranteeing the First Amendment is because we need a mechanism to confront and undermine and subvert and check institutions of authority and the most powerful people in our country. That's what journalism is.
So I agree with him. The problem is all Glenn does is simp for those institutions and powerful people. I'm just saying, like, I get it. Glenn used to be a journalist, but now he just makes Rumble content. And by the way, Rumble is backed by Peter Thiel. Like, he just, like, all this man does is enrich these powerful people. So yes, I totally agree that a lot of journalists have abdicated their duties and they're not using their platform to speak truth to power. I literally talk about that in my video. I don't know if he's gonna show that part. But like, that's you, Glenn. That's you.
Is for. It's to bring them down pegs. It's to expose their secrets. That these people who work in these corporations have done the opposite of that. They're the ones who are causing our country to be without journalists, even though they bear the HR title of journalist, because they have done the opposite of what that function is. They serve power. They disseminate its propaganda. They do not challenge or investigate these institutions of authority. The people they investigate and challenge are ordinary citizens in the country.
Okay, hold on. Ordinary citizens. By ordinary citizens, like, who are you talking about? Is Mark Zuckerberg an ordinary citizen? Is Elon Musk an ordinary citizen? Or are they powerful billionaires?
Taylor Lorenz's biggest story as a journalist was uncovering the private citizen who ran the Libs of TikTok account.
Okay, this is so funny. First of all, the Libs of TikTok story was not even remotely my biggest story, like in any capacity. But Chaya Raichek is not a private citizen. She is a powerful influencer making millions of dollars by pushing anti-LGBTQ hate. At the point that I had written about her, she had been on Tucker Carlson multiple times. She had given interviews to the New York Post. Ron DeSantis' press secretary said that Chaya was directly informing the anti-LGBTQ laws in Florida. So at that point, you're a public figure. If Joe Rogan is talking about you multiple times on the show, you're on Fox News constantly, you're giving interviews to the right-wing media, you're fundraising, you're taking investment from Seth Dillon, then you're not a private figure anymore. You're a powerful public person that should be reported on. And that's what Glenn seems to kind of like ignore. Like he frames these like really powerful people in American politics, basically all the right-wing ones, as like, oh, they're just like average citizens. Like Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, Chaya Raichek, Matt Walsh, Ben Shapiro, these are just private citizens. What are you talking about? No, that's the whole point, is that they're not private citizens. And yes, I did write about Chaya Raichek's identity because I think at that point, you are no longer a private citizen. And you don't deserve to be operating an anonymous account that's influencing state legislation and getting teachers fired across the country, by the way, because Chaya was actually doxing other trans, and LGBTQ teachers and getting them fired and harassed and all this stuff. You don't get to operate in impunity like that when nobody knows who you are. So I think it's in the public interest for people to know who someone like that is. I totally stand by that story 100%, and I will never not stand by that story. So it's just interesting who Glenn considers private citizens.
Taylor Lorenz has never challenged or exposed any lies or secrets or corruption in the CIA or in the FBI. Okay,
what? I don't cover the CIA or FBI, bro. Taylor Lorenz has never exposed the CIA. That's not even what I write about. I'm a technology journalist. Do you understand what that means? I cover technology and culture. I write about power on the internet. I don't write about national security. Go call Ken Klippenstein.
Or in Wall Street.
I actually have reported on Wall Street, but I guess he did. I guess he missed those stories.
Or in Silicon Valley,
Or in Silicon Valley. Okay, hold up. What? I've written about powerful Silicon Valley billionaires all the time. Glenn is very actually aware of my reporting on that because he's defended those billionaires against my reporting.
Second biggest story is that one time she was in the app Clubhouse and she heard somebody use the word retarded and she ran to Twitter and told a tattletale, and she attributed it to Mark Andreessen, and it turned out Mark Andreessen had not said that, so she had to correct her second biggest story.
What? I never even wrote about that. I don't even know what he's talking about. He's literally making up a story. Please go through my entire byline history and tell me where I ever reported this. Tell me where I ever wrote a story about what he's talking about. I think he's talking about when I shared a tweet from another reporter once where I confused Mark Andreessen and Ben Horowitz, who are two bald, powerful billionaires that own this powerful venture capital firm together. And I confused one bald white guy for the other bald white guy in a single tweet once. And then people were like, oh no, it wasn't Mark Andreessen that said that, it was Ben Horowitz that said it. And I was like, oh, sorry, the other bald white guy said it. In a tweet that was up for maybe 120 seconds 5 years ago. That's my second biggest story. I've had stories that made people pass laws. I never even wrote this story. Glenn, if you're gonna say that I wrote stories, come with links. Come with the links.
Taylor Lorenz has more corrections appended to her stories than almost any person working in media. And
I have almost no corrections. What are you talking about? Once again, you just made up a story that I've never written out of nowhere.
The amazing thing about that is her stories are so trivial that it's almost impossible to even get an editor to care enough to correct them, and yet...
Okay, clearly this man, doesn't read my stories.
She has a mountain of them. Long ones, big ones, major ones.
What are you talking about? I don't. Go on my story. What are you talking about? This doesn't exist. Look at my stories. He's just making shit up out of his brain.
And yet she seems to think she's the success story, and on some level, bizarrely, she kind of is, given that she's at least been able to draw attention to herself just because she's just such an extreme, she's almost like high camp at this point. I have to say that I've kind of come to appreciate Taylor Lorenz in the way that just these kind of people can have this sort of campy, iconic appeal.
Campy, iconic appeal? Thank you, Glenn. Thank you.
But there's nothing positive about her journalistically, except for the fact that she provides a window into the pathology that is causing it to collapse. So she is right that society is worse off without journalists. And the problem is that the more people employed by these big media corporations, the less journalists we have.
You guys, the more journalists that media companies employ, the less journalists we have. Make it make sense. Make it make sense.
And that's why I say it is not just well-deserved, but a cause for celebration to watch these outlets that have done far more misleading and far more propagandizing and far more attacking of ordinary citizens than powerful.
Okay, so he's just never going to show the part of my video where I talk about all this, I guess. He just cut that whole part out of the video. Because he's saying all this stuff that I say in my video and address in my video, but he's not playing it. So I'm just kind of curious. He's talking about all this stuff that I talk about in my video, and yet he's conveniently cropped it out of his video. So
break down and collapse and disintegrate because they're anti-journalism and not journalism. And because of their failures, people are paying increasing attention to independent media, people who have offered something that the public is interested in.
Okay, wait a second. Glenn, ding, 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 ding. That's my entire beat. What you are describing, independent media, people building audiences on the internet, that is what I write about. I think actually, I feel like this man is maybe just confused. Like maybe he got it in his head somewhere that I'm a national security reporter. And so he thinks I'm just like an atrocious national security reporter. Cause like, why am I not exposing the FBI and CIA and like instead writing about like powerful right-wing influencers? And he's like, whoa, she sucks at her reporting. It's like, yeah, I mean, I guess if you think that that's my beat, but my beat is not that. My beat is writing about the independent media, as in the content creator universe, which by the way, I came from. So it's just very funny. Like Glenn is late to this, let's not forget. I guess he was a blogger too. So blogger respect blogger, but it's just funny because like I talk about this extensively in all my videos and I write about this. Like I literally produced this massive print package and wrote like an entire book. I wrote an entire book last year. No, I actually wrote it it took me 2.5 years to write, but I wrote an entire book. Glenn, please, you want to talk about the independent media? My entire book is about the rise of the independent media, of people building audiences on the internet and that subsuming the traditional media. I actually have like parts in my book where I talk about legacy media imploding and I say like if legacy media does not adapt, they are going to fall by the wayside. This is like the core thesis of this massive 380-page book that I published last year, that Simon & Schuster published last year. So it's interesting to hear Glenn talk about this because it's like, Glenn, I think you might get my beat. I think you might start to understand what I write about. I write about online influence. I don't write about the CIA.
Develop a level of trust and faith that you can find people who will inform you, who will do their best to tell you what they see is happening.
This is so crazy. This is literally everything I wrote about. This is my entire beat.
You may not always agree with them, but you know that they are at least doing their best and have no constraints, no corporate constraints on the sorts of things they can and can't say.
That's the end of the video? Oh my God. Wait a minute, so he just flat out never showed the rest of my TikTok. He never showed the rest of my TikTok where I made all the points that he makes in the second part of his video, like the second part of his video where he's like trying to make this weird response to me. Like I talk about that on TikTok all day. Also, I report on that all day. Okay, Glenn, I'm gonna read you a quick passage from my book, Extremely Online. I think it might help you kind of understand the things that I actually cover. So this is just like a couple lines. The explosive growth of the content creator industry of today is the culmination of decades of user-driven platform evolution. The internet connected the world, allowing talented creators to bypass traditional gatekeepers and build fanatical audiences directly online. When one thinks of the media, they often think of broadcast news and newspapers. In reality, content creators are the media of today. The media landscape that they dominate is only becoming more digital and more distributed. Cycles of virality are accelerating. Online influence can make you a Hollywood sensation, morph you into a powerful business leader, or take you to the White House. These shifts will only be compounded with technological advances such as the rise of AI. Legacy institutions that refuse to adapt will continue to fade into oblivion. I just think that's kind of interesting. Anyway, if you want to see more videos, please hit subscribe and leave a comment below. Would love to hear your thoughts on this.